Before we get to today's episode, let's talk about something so many writers I coach run into. You're in the middle of your first draft. You have more ideas and material than you know what to do with, and it's hard to get your arms around all of it. Maybe you're stalled, or you can't quite find the story inside the mess. Most of the time, there's a weak link in your story's foundation. I made a free resource called the Story Clarity Worksheet. This helps you find exactly where your story foundation is solid and where the gaps are, so you know exactly what's missing and what to do next. Go to nancypanuccio.com/clarity to download yours. nancypanuccio.com/clarity. Okay, on to today's episode. The writers I see sustain their excitement the longest are not the ones with the most discipline. They're not the ones with the strictest schedules or the highest word count goals. They're the ones who are always learning something inside their work. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has the story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and book coach. Each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now, let's begin. Do you ever stop believing in your book? I want to talk about that today because I see this a lot. A writer starts their book with all this hope and energy and momentum. The story feels vivid in their head. They feel it in their bones. The idea won't leave them alone. They jot ideas into their phone app. They think about their characters on the car ride to work. They're truly excited about their story, and it feels easy. And then somewhere around chapter 8 or chapter 15, or maybe you're 3 months in or 6 months in, something shifts. The story that felt so electric starts to feel flat. So the writer sits down to write and feels nothing. They're bored with their own pages, and that boredom doesn't stay contained to the story. It bleeds into something darker. If I'm bored with my own story, maybe the story isn't good enough. And if the story isn't good enough, maybe I'm not good enough to write it. That is the spiral. There's a lack of faith in the story, which becomes lack of faith in themselves. And underneath both is something very specific and very painful. The gap between the story they envisioned and the story that's showing up on the page. The story that felt electric in their head looks smaller on the page. It looks flatter. And that gap is where most writers stop believing in themselves. Writing is like a relationship. It has seasons. The beginning is intoxicating. You can't stop thinking about it. You're in love with it. You'll cancel plans on Saturday to be with it. Everything feels fantastic and you're on fire. And then one day you sit down and you look at your pages and the magic is gone. The faith is gone. And instead of recognizing that as a normal season, most writers do what we all do when something we love stops feeling good. They look for an explanation. And the explanation they land on is almost always the same one. I'm not a real writer. Real writers don't lose faith in their work. Real writers were born for this, and I was not. And here's what I want to say about that. We all experience this. Every writer I know, published, unfinished, somewhere in between, has sat with this feeling at some point. Losing faith in your story or in yourself as a writer is not a character flaw. It's not a missing gene. It's a signal that you're hyper-focused on the wrong thing. And today, I'm going to give you 3 ways to believe in your book again. Because here's the thing. Failing at your story is actually quite hard to do if you understand what's really in your control. And most writers don't. Most writers have accidentally handed the definition of success to people and forces outside of them, most of them invisible, who have nothing to do with the actual work. So today I'm going to show you how to take back control of the one thing that was always yours, your experience of writing your book. So here we go. Number 1, make the process the reward. Here's the root of the problem for most writers who lose steam. At some point in your writing process, you stopped being curious about your story and started worrying about its future. You stopped experimenting, trying things, following instincts, discovering what the story wanted to be. And you started calculating, will this work? Will readers like this? Will they care to read it? Is this good enough? And the moment you tied your enjoyment to the outcome, you handed it to forces completely outside of your control. But here's what I want you to understand. No beta reader's opinion, no agent's rejection, no feedback that you get from the outside world can disqualify you from your own enjoyment of the writing process. That enjoyment is yours. It's inviolable. It belongs to you, but only if you keep it. Now, some writers respond to clinging to the outcome by reaching for a blueprint. Save the cat, the hero's journey. And I want to be clear, I teach structure. It's what my whole 3-act story course is all about. It's the foundation of every story that works. But there's a difference between understanding how stories are built and using a formula as a life raft. When you're 40 pages in and suddenly spending 3 months outlining every scene, that's not structure. That's fear dressed up as planning. The answer isn't a better blueprint. It's getting back in the room with your story and getting curious again. The writers who stay lit up mid-draft are the ones who are still curious, still experimenting, still following a thread just to see where it goes, not because they know it will work, but because it interests them. They're not writing toward a result, they're writing to find out. That's what making the process the reward looks like. It's not discipline, it's not grinding through, it's curiosity. The willingness to try something and not know yet whether it's right. And the thing is, your story is not carved in stone. It's not glass that's going to break. The outcome lives in the future, in other people's hands. Curiosity lives right now on the page, in this scene, in this sentence you haven't even written yet. So while you're moving through your first draft, stay curious, keep experimenting, stay open, stay receptive. That's how the work stays alive, because you're not tied to any external reward. Okay, on to number 2. Focus on the work, not the outcome. Larry Sutton once put it this way: focus on what the work needs, not what you need from the work. Let me say that again. Focus on what the work needs, not what you need from the work. That one statement reoriented everything for me when I was getting my MFA, because most of us have it backwards. We come to the page asking, will this be good enough? Will people like it? Will it sell? Those are questions about what we need from the work: validation, approval, proof that we belong here. The work doesn't care about any of that. The work just needs you to show up and serve it. Writers who stay lit up are the ones who have fallen in love with the pursuit, not the destination, not the finished book on the shelf or the imagined review. The daily practice of reaching for something just beyond what they already know how to do, that's what keeps them engaged. The outcome is the destination. The pursuit is where you actually live. And fulfillment, real fulfillment, comes from the pursuit. Okay, on to number 3. Deepen your craft. This is the one that changes everything. The writers I see sustain their excitement the longest are not the ones with the most discipline. They're not the ones with the strictest schedules or the highest word count goals. They're the ones who are always learning something inside their work. One of the most powerful ways to do that is to read like a writer, not for pleasure, not to escape, but with laser-focused attention on one craft element at a time. How did this author handle the transition between scenes? How did she signal a time jump without stopping the story? What is this dialogue actually doing underneath the words? Doug Glover, one of the finest writing teachers I've encountered, once said that literature is an encyclopedia of technique. So every novel you read is a masterclass if you know what to look for. Inside the Emerging Writers Academy, this is something we come back to constantly. Reading like a writer with focused attention on one craft element at a time, and then taking what you notice directly back to your own manuscript. That's the practice. You're reading a novel or memoir, and you're noticing how the author handled a highly emotional scene, for example, or a scene transition, or how they entered a scene, how they left a scene, how they tied different storylines together. And then you're going back to your own manuscript and trying it. You're experimenting. You're asking, how do I write a major turning point that actually lands? How do I make this secondary character feel like a real human being who's essential to the story instead of a plot device? How do I get the pacing right in this chapter? Those are craft questions, and craft questions are endlessly fascinating. There's no bottom to them. You can spend an entire writing life getting better at dialogue, getting better at pacing and scene creation and sequencing, and never exhaust the subject. This is what I mean by getting better. Not perfection, which you'll never get, but growth. Perfection is the destination you'll never reach, and chasing it makes you miserable. Getting better is a direction. You're always moving toward it, and moving towards something is fundamentally more energizing than waiting for something outside of yourself to happen, like the agent's acceptance, like the publishing contract, like all your beta readers saying, "This is fantastic." The writers who lose interest in their books have usually stopped learning inside the story itself. The work has become execution, filling in what they already know rather than discovery. And execution without discovery is just an empty experience that's bound to make you lose faith in your own story. It's bound to make you feel disconnected from your own story. So here's the question I want you to bring to your next writing session. What am I trying to get better at today? Not what am I going to write, but what am I going to try to do better? We're not taking big shifts here. They can be very small. It's about getting a little better every time you sit down to write. That question will keep you interested in your work in the long term, long after the novelty of the idea has worn off, long after the first chapter excitement has faded, long after self-doubt has pulled up a chair beside you. So, if you've lost faith in your book, if you're disenchanted with it and disappointed in yourself, if you've been sitting with that quiet dread and uncertainty, wondering if you have what it takes, I want you to hear this. You haven't lost faith because you're not a real writer. You've lost faith because you've been pointing your attention at the wrong things totally outside of your control. What you do have control over is your own relationship to your own story. So here's what to do instead. Number one, make the process the reward. Stay curious, stay open, stay receptive, keep experimenting. Don't let the outcome steal the only part of this that actually belongs to you. Number two, focus on the work. Give the work what it needs, not what you need from the work. The outcome is a destination. The pursuit is where you actually live. And number three, deepen your craft. Read like a writer. Ask what you're going to learn today, not just what you're going to write. There's always something to reach for. There's always something to fall in love with. The writers who do these three things consistently are the ones who bring their books to the finish line. Not because finishing was the goal, but because they never abandoned their relationship with the work. And a writer who stays in relationship with their story, who keeps showing up for it with curiosity and devotion, well, that writer finishes. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform. And if you're listening on Apple, please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.